Hi, I'm Paul Germain. Welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a variety of topics from hurricane protection to docking. And the general idea is to provide you with some information that will help you make better, smarter decisions and have more fun in the water. And this particular show is kind of up that alley. It has to do with boat restoration. And joining me to give us some insights into this process is Ron McBain of Harpoon Yacht Services. Welcome, Ron.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming. You know, we've got a really interesting show here today that I think a lot of people are going to learn from. But before we get into that, maybe we could talk a little bit about your boating background. And we have a lot of photos here today that we're going to use. And this first one, I think, is kind of part of your boating background, right?
Absolutely. I got involved with boating about 25 years ago. And it happened to be on a windjammer out of Camden, Maine. And it was only a couple hours sail, but it changed my life.
Really?
I knew from that point on that's what I was going to do with my life.
Wow, that's an impactful situation.
It was.
Now, you have had some other boating-related experience as well. We've got a photo here. This looks like an old Elco. You were involved in a...
Yeah, it was Block Island Maritime Funding. I've been affiliated with them for a number of years. I'm roughly affiliated with them now, still volunteer. It's a boat donation outfit. They take in boat donations to raise money for other nonprofit charities that are maritime related.
Yeah, that's a great cause.
Yeah.
And you've got some experience actually doing some boat restoration through that program, right?
Yeah, this is Starbound. This is kind of how I got into boat restoration in the first place. I wooded the 72-foot catch down to bare wood and then repainted her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I did it alone. It was a big job. And it was a lot of fun, had a good time doing it, and she came out beautiful.
Yeah, sure did.
And she's been on around the world twice, and there's a book written about her.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow, well, that's a distinctive boat. And I guess you probably learned a lot in that experience, right?
Oh, I certainly did.
Yeah. So with that experience, why don't we go ahead and move into the meat of the show?
That sounds great.
All right.
Let's get going.
Well, again, we've got about 3 pictures of the boat that you started with for the restoration. Can you give us a little background, a little overview of what got you started?
Right. Well, after that windjammer sail up in Maine, within 6 months I had bought this boat. So I owned this boat for 25 years.
Wow.
And sailed her extensively. And I had her up for sale, needed to sell her. And the right buyer finally came along and wanted to do a refit. And that was what I was hoping for.
Wow.
And he had the means to do it. And so we took on the challenge.
That's a little unusual for someone to buy a boat and then
but it was
commission
what
the
I was
seller
wishing.
to do a complete restoration.
Right, and so when I owned her, she was Bolero.
Yeah.
And so here she is being picked up on the trailer and taking her over to the shop. It was a really aggressive project.
Oh.
The timeline was within 6 months.
Now, did you start in the fall? Is it because I think we got a picture of it in the shed? So
right, we started
you the protection to do the project throughout the winter.
That's exactly right. Because we had to have it done for spring.
Okay.
We started in October, or I started in October, and got the boat into a workspace before it was actually a shop.
All right.
And
now, within this project, did you do certain activities and outsource other activities?
Yes, I couldn't take it on all by myself.
Right.
One, I didn't have the skills for some of the things that needed to be done on the interior.
Yeah.
But I was the one responsible for all the finish work, the project management, and the engine installation.
Okay.
We did have a wish list that we bid out to a couple of different outfits, and we chose one, Norris Marine Systems.
Okay.
And they came in during the daytime and did all of the interior systems work, while at night I would do the exterior work.
That's interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
so the boat was being worked on literally 18 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I've never heard of that.
It was an aggressive schedule. It's what we had to do.
It was necessary, huh? All right. Now, so you brought the boat into the shed, and here's a picture from the bow looking back towards the stern. I guess it's like almost any project, you kind of you got to do an assessment, take an inventory, kind of where you're at initially, right?
Right. In order to do that, the first thing I did was take a photo assessment of the boat. I photo documented everything inside and out. This is the view of the bow looking aft, and then the next view we have looking into the cockpit. And this kind of gives the audience a view of what the boat was before I started. So kind of keep this in mind so that later on down the road, you can see the before and after in your mind a little bit better.
Right, and once you take it apart, which we're going to show them, it's a little bit tough to remember where all the pieces went. So this is a nice photo documentary of where everything was, right?
Right.
It's an orientation point.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Now, when you guys were working together on the project, you were trying to take this boat and just bring it up to really a new level of finish, right?
Right. And the new owner, his desire, he loves vintage things, loves old homes, old cars, old boats.
Okay.
And this is his boat project.
All right.
And so the goal was to bring an old boat back into showroom standards,
Yes.
but much better than that.
Yes, yes, yes. So you start with the assessment, and then I guess you've got to take everything off, disassemble everything.
Right. Now you got to dig in. Now you got to take all the deck hardware apart, label everything, keep everything in Ziploc bags so all the components are organized on shelving, and take everything apart because you have to get access to everything anyways in order to repair and to paint.
Yeah.
And everything needed to be rebedded anyways. After 37 years,
yeah, that's a long time for
it
things
needed
to
a
get.
rebed.
Right.
So
right.
we brought the boat back to a clean slate, basically.
Okay, all right. We've got like 6 or 7 pictures of this. Let's see here. Now, actually, we don't have quite that many. This is because I remember this particular shot because there's you're there at night.
Yep.
You're working by yourself.
I'm alone.
Yeah, you don't have a guy on the other side, on the inside of the hull or the outside of the hull. So
I
you
need
have
to be in two
some
places
different
at
methods.
once.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So here's one way of doing it. We have our locking vice grips below deck, and I need to take out the Genoa tracks above deck.
Yes.
So here's one way of doing it using blocks and vice grips.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of stuff going on.
And padding below for when that vice grip drops, you don't dent something.
Right,
Yes.
right. So did you find yourself doing a lot of this type
over
thing?
and over and over again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah. So the nice thing is you could work uninterrupted, but the drawback is you had no one to help.
It was a challenge.
Right. All right. So we're taking all the hardware off, we're labeling it, we're bagging it,
Putting it on shelves.
And that the old caulking has got the death grip on a lot of things, but you're, I don't know,
That's
sawing
exactly
it
right.
off or heating it up or whatever means necessary, right?
Solvents and chisels and heat guns.
Yeah, all right. Now, so you get all the stuff off, all the hardware off, and then you kind of got to start checking for the integrity of different things to get them up to 100%.
Right. Well, here's how we started on the project. Before we got the boat into the shop, when it was still at the old marina, I had a marine surveyor come to the boat and do a complete assessment of the boat. And he sounded out the deck, and he moisture metered the hull and the deck. We knew there was a few voided areas that needed to be repaired, and this is one of them.
Oh,
This is a good example.
So you drilled a lot of holes in the deck, it looks like.
Well, there was a void in the deck, and the deck is comprised of 3 layers. There's a fiberglass layer on the bottom, and then on top, and coring in the middle.
Like a sandwich,
Yeah, so like a sandwich, and the sandwich had become gapped.
Yes.
So this is one of the areas that had marine plywood in it where there was standing rigging or something like that going through in that area. And I had to fill a void with saturated epoxy. Thickened epoxy.
So
that's why you drill a bunch of holes.
And then
you overfill it until it oozes out all of the holes.
Okay, all right.
And then I believe in the next shot, so where the batteries are in this shot, I'm using the battery weight in order to compress the deck together again.
Okay, so no air bubbles or anything in there.
Right, and then you notice I put wax paper between the epoxy and the batteries so the batteries didn't stick to the deck.
Yeah, so they weren't there forever and ever.
No, but the wax paper doesn't stick to the epoxy, which is great.
Let's see what else we got here. Oh,
I did find moisture.
This could be an issue, right? Yeah.
It was a huge issue, and this was under the binnacle.
And this probably isn't abnormal, right? An older boat, it's going to have certain points where water is likely to seep in and where you're likely to find damage.
Right, and the binnacle, if you're sailing along and you're leaning on that wheel, it's going to come unsealed at some point, and it did.
Right.
But I was very happy. This is the only place that I found water intrusion into the core. So I had to cut
plywood underneath.
Well, it's plywood underneath, and then there's also balsa coring. The dark areas are balsa coring.
Okay.
So I had to clear out all of that area, refill it in with plywood, and then reglass over all that. I think the next shots show the plywood.
Yeah, so you saw it out.
Well, I kept the top skin I cut the top skin away,
Yes.
kept the bottom skin so that I
Yes.
can keep the structure of the boat in together.
Okay.
And then I started rebuilding that whole area.
All right. All right. And this looks like, I don't know, what's that, a couple feet by a couple feet?
Oh, at least, yeah, 3
Footprint?
feet by 3 feet, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So how long did it take to kind of get in and clean up the area?
Well, it didn't take that long, Paul. I mean, I just sounded it out, figured out where the problems were, and then took a multi-saw. I think I have it up in the shot there,
Right.
to the multi-tool,
Okay.
and cut that out,
All right.
and kept on cutting back until I found dry
I see.
balsa.
So like a ever expanding circle.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But I
Okay.
try
That
to
makes
keep it
sense.
straight,
Yes.
straight cut, so
Right.
it was
Right.
easy.
Right. So you get enough to cover the damaged area, but not too much where you're cutting into good stuff.
Right, and I reused that the top layer again
Yes.
into the rebuild
To make
and
it
then,
look nice and seamless.
Right, ground that all out and then glassed it all in,
Yeah.
so it's flush.
We've got another. So here.
Marine grade plywood instead of balsa core this time.
Okay. All right.
It was just a lot easier to work with and made a much stronger foundation for the new pedestal that was going to go in.
Oh, okay.
It was a much bigger base than what the old pedestal was.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of this process was improving it along the way.
Exactly, making it better than new.
Right.
Right.
Right. So you put the marine plywood in, then you're coating it with some sort of fiberglass resin or something?
Well, I epoxy coated this one in and then put the
okay.
top skin back on and epoxied that in, and then I ground out around the edges
Okay.
and then glassed, relayered up the glass so that it would be flush.
Now, how long
with the
did
cockpit
it
saw.
take you to do this particular?
Oh, I did that over a couple of days' time. You need some time overnights to let the epoxy cure and
Right.
come back and grind, fill
Right.
again.
Right. So it's a multi-step process.
Oh, everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if we take this particular one as an example, did you anticipate it taking a certain amount of time, and did it come in more or less for the target that you had selected?
Well, some of these repairs I've never done before,
Yes.
and so I didn't really know how much time they were going to take.
Right.
But it did take quite a bit more time than I kind of estimated.
Yes.
But it did take more time.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And here you're
So
smoothing it in, I guess, huh?
right, here's the final fairing, and everything on the hull is now filled in. All of the old hull holes
Place where the fittings went?
for the fittings. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, really? Okay.
Are all filled in.
Okay,
It's
okay.
kind of ready for prime now.
I see. Okay.
And we have one more shot here.
Yeah,
I
what's going on here?
I reamed out all of the coring in everything that had deck hardware going through it,
Yes.
so
okay.
that I could tape up underneath the bottom with duct tape,
Okay.
so that the epoxy wouldn't drain into the cabin areas.
Right.
So that I could backfill all of the reamed out areas where there was balsa core, so that in the future there was no chance of water ever getting into the deck.
Okay, so that was like a preventative maintenance.
It was
type
preventative
thing.
maintenance, again, just to make the boat better than it was out of production.
Right. And how long did that process take?
Oh, days.
Yeah, that's a lot of drilling and filling, and
It is.
It's
yeah.
got to set up and everything. Yeah.
Exactly, and then go back and sand it out. And then the important part of this is that you take a reaming tool and you put a dimple in each of those areas that you're going to reuse those holes,
Yes.
because they're filled in for paint now.
Yes.
But
yes.
you got to dimple them, or else you lose your reference
Yeah,
in
you
the
won't know where
future.
they went. Right.
So that's the important step.
Yeah,
here.
that's a nice aspect of doing a restoration, where you are able to look for trouble areas that maybe over time have become known, and you can address them. And so moving forward, you knew you took that original, I don't know what you call it, design flaw, but design quality, and took it off the table.
Well, in production, they've got to cut corners all the time in order to save costs.
Right.
I didn't have to do this here.
Right.
My challenge was to make it better and to last another 30 years,
Yes.
at least.
Yes. Yep. Well, let's see here. So this is, it gets you getting ready to paint here? Is
Right,
that the next
here-
phase? So far we've done what? Assessment. We've taken all the hardware off. We've improved the integrity of the
Right.
deck.
Filled in all the core areas that were bad. All the delaminations have been repaired at this point.
Yep.
Now we've got a coat of primer on.
Okay.
And now once that first coat of primer goes on,
Yeah.
you have an opportunity to go back and see the areas that got neglected before, that got missed. There was chips and dings and things
really?
like that.
So that helps
you
to
gotta-
illuminate those
So you have to go back and fill those things in order to get a perfect paint job.
Yeah. Now, are you spraying the paint? Are you
No.
painting the paint? Are you rollering the paint? How are you putting the paint on?
Right. Well, I wasn't allowed to spray indoors inside this space, so I chose rolling. They call it rolling and tipping, but I only used a roller.
Right.
I'm using Epiphanes paints.
Yeah.
Some people call it Epiphanes. I've noted as Epiphanes as well. But I use their Epiphanes foam roller.
Oh.
And I developed a technique in order to lay it off very lightly so
Yes.
that I can go from section to section and have it very
Feather
smooth.
it in together, right?
Exactly.
Right. How 4-inch roller, 6-inch roller?
They're about 4 to 6 I think 6 inches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you go over this. This is after you've gone over, and again, this is highlighting the imperfections that you couldn't see before that process. Yeah.
Right. So we have our first coat of primer on. You have to go back and sand that primer down to a very thin coat, and then we prime again and sand that back again.
Okay.
And then it's ready for the top coats.
What are we seeing in this?
Right here, we're seeing the top coats in right now.
The top coats in. So how many coats of paint are we talking about?
We're
here?
talking about 3 coats of 2-part Epiphanes paint.
That's the top coat, or that's the base coat plus the top
Well,
coat?
it's 2 base coats plus 1 coat of the finish.
One finished coat.
And I sanded between coats.
All right. Now, I know we might talk a little bit about this topic a little later, but paint compatibility, finish compatibility, were there any issues as you went over the original gel coat finish with these paints you were using?
Because it was gel coat and I had it sanded down, it was ready to accept a paint finish.
Oh, I see.
When it came to the hull, that's when I had a paint compatibility. It wasn't an issue, but it was something that I had to be concerned about.
So here, by sanding it down,
Right.
basically it was a good grip from the old gel coat to the new paint.
Exactly, because I had used a good primer. It was the primer for the paint itself.
Yeah,
so it was a really good tact.
That's critical, right? The primer.
Exactly.
Give it some bite.
Yeah, the primer is everything for a paint job.
Yeah. How about this photo here? What's the difference, what we're seeing here and what we
Right,
just saw?
so this is the next step. We're getting ready to do the non-skid areas.
Okay.
So I'm using a 3M fine line tape to tape out all of the non-skid areas to isolate them from the soft areas that were once gel coat and now it's top coat paint.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready to paint.
Now, did you change? There's I guess there's opportunities for creativity in this process. Did you change anything? Like when I think of this, I think, well, the footprint of the non-skid. Did you say, oh, well, this would be nice to have non-skid over here and here and here, or did you follow the original footprint of things like that?
Well, because I had to sand away all of the footprint of the old non-skid in the preparation for paint, I did go back to the photos that I had talked about earlier to reference kind of what that outline was.
Right.
And then I used some liberties to create my own designs for deck drains and things like that.
Right, because you have an experience base to work from, and you can say, okay, this would work well if I did it this way.
Right, and it looked good the way I was taping it out, and I used a circle template in order to make circles.
Oh, yeah.
And I used one of those wiggly templates so that I could create lines so that I can use a knife to cut away around the circles and things like that to get really nice clean edges.
Yeah, and so did you find yourself, you just mentioned a lot of things you did on the boat were your first time. Did you find like a process like this when you start, you're heading in the right general direction, but did you find as you went through the balance of that particular phase of the project, did you find things smoothing out, you got better at it?
Oh, I did. I got confidence, I got skills.
Right.
And the areas that I had troubles with, I would go and try to find YouTube videos.
Oh, okay.
And see how somebody else would approach the project.
Yes.
And get ideas.
That's always a good thing to do.
And then you can always riff off of that.
Right. Let's see what we got here.
So here we go into the non-skid area.
Yeah.
This is the cockpit and some of the deck. I used a great product. It's called Soft Sand. And it comes in a quart container with a shaker. It's kind of like a spice container.
Yeah.
And what you do is you put a bottom coat of paint on, the 2-part paint.
All right.
And before it dries, you go in and sprinkle in the soft sand.
Yeah.
And what I do is I overspread it.
Oh, you
I
do.
put more down than what I actually need to get a nice even pattern. And then wait for that to dry overnight.
All right.
And you can go back with a little broom and sweep up and collect and reuse the stuff that didn't stick.
Yeah.
And then vacuum that off.
Interesting, yeah.
Oh, here we got a view of the deck.
Yes, yeah.
So this is ready now for the top coats of paint.
I see. Okay, so They put the bottom coat, spread the stuff, knock off the excess, and
Exactly.
then go to the
Clean
top
it,
coat.
and then you're ready for top coating.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to be a high traction surface.
It's
which is
unbelievable.
Ideally what you want, right?
In the test sails and the way that we had the boat heeling over and it was all wet,
Yeah.
I did not slip one bit. It was
Great,
just
huh?
great stuff.
Yeah.
I love the product.
Now here's another shot. This is with the paint applied to it.
Right, now it took 3 coats of top coat Epiphanes to fill in because the rubber non-skid
Yes.
absorbs the paint.
Oh, it does.
So it takes a couple of coats to get
Okay.
a really nice,
Oh,
even
interesting.
look to it.
Yeah. Well, this looks like it came out nice. You must have been pleased with it.
I was very, very happy with the way the deck. I was getting a little bit confident at this point.
Now, see, we've done a lot with the hardware. We've done a lot with the deck. Now you shift your attention to the hull. The pictures that we started off with made the hull look like it just came out of the factory, quite frankly. It looked great. But I guess when you start to get down to it, you start to pick up some of the imperfections, right?
Right. So this was a 30-year-old paint job, and it was Emron paint.
Oh,
And
original
it
paint?
was original paint.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
And now we're using Epiphanes paint, and the solvents might be different. So you have to do something called a scratch test.
Okay.
So you scratch with a knife into the hull, a
Yeah.
checker pattern.
Yeah.
And then you put the solvent onto a gauze.
Yeah.
Tape that onto the hull for about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Take that off and put a very aggressive masking tape on the hull, and then rip it off.
Right.
If none of the checkers came off the hull, then the paint's compatible.
Okay.
And you know you're good to go.
All right.
Otherwise, all the paint has to come off the hull.
Okay.
So I found that it didn't have to do that. So
Nice.
I started sanding the hull down with 120 grit paper,
Yeah.
and discovered a lot of little cracks in the
that
gel
you couldn't
coat.
really see
You couldn't
when it
see
was
it
painted.
under the
Right.
paint.
Right,
But once
right.
you started taking the paint down,
Yeah.
there was little checks in
You
the
could
gel
see
coat,
it. Right.
and those needed to be addressed.
Here's another photograph of that. So again, it looks very different than it did when it was on the trailer.
Right. So
earlier.
the more you sand, the more it comes off, and you got to fill and find all the little chips and fill them with 2-part fairing compound. And so this is one area of the hull.
All right.
It takes a couple of days to do this. To
Oh, I bet it does.
Make your loops around the hull with a
job.
sander.
Yeah.
But I used a great sander. It's a Festool sander. It's a vacuum sander. So it really cuts down on a lot of the dirt that could have gotten into the air.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So
yeah.
it just vacuums it
So
right
this
up.
is an iterative process where you're sanding, you see the imperfection, you fill it,
Fill
then
it,
you got to sand it
sand it.
again, and so on and so forth.
Exactly,
So you go round
Paul.
and around. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We've got another photo here.
So here we are with the first coat of primer on, and it's already sanded.
Yeah.
And then again, you're going to find little imperfections that you go back and
The
you.
primer actually helps you find the highs
really
and the lows,
does.
right? That's what I think they call it ghosting, where they put it on, and then you're basically trying to sand as much of it off, and you see those low spots because the primer's still in it.
Right, and it's a great opportunity. That's your last chance to go back and make the hull perfect. So
Yeah. And especially in a dark color, you want this thing to be right.
exactly.
Yeah. Let's see what else we get here.
All right, so here's the
What's going on
second
here?
coat of primer on the
Okay.
boat.
Yeah.
And again, now everything's been fixed on the hull. Now it has to be sanded back with 400 down to 400 grit paper
Okay.
for a perfect substrate to apply to accept the top coat paint.
So from the time that you started getting to the hull and working on the imperfections to this point,
It's about 2 weeks' time.
a couple of weeks, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because there was a large repair area that I had to do with glass that we're not showing in this,
Oh, I see.
but it took a lot of time to glass that up and fair it
Okay.
out and get it. It was right in the round section of the hull, so
All right. And
It
here
was very
we've got
important.
it. More primer.
yeah, this is second coat of primer.
Yep.
And it's sanded down to 400 grit. It's a super smooth surface.
Yeah.
And it's ready for our top coats of
Really
paint, which
nice
is
looking.
really exciting.
Let's take a look at that. There it
So,
is, huh?
Yeah, this is at least 3 coats of paint on there. You have to sand it down between coats.
You do. Okay.
And it's a big learning curve in order to get this right.
Yeah.
And so it looks like a spray job,
Yes.
but it's just perfectly rolled.
Really?
And I had to perfect my technique
Yes.
in order to get this to happen, but it's very exciting once it did happen.
That is exciting. Here's another picture. That's a beautiful shot.
Right, so here it is getting towards summertime now, and the cove stripes painted, the boot stripes painted, the bottom has 1 coat on it, and yeah, very exciting times.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now you had to replace an engine here, and is that typical of a refit or a restoration? Put the engine in, but you didn't really know kind of how it would fit, right?
Right, well, I've never done this before as well.
Yeah.
I had an old 3QM30 seawater cooled engine We put a Yanmar 3GH5E in, and it was a completely different footprint than the old engine.
Right.
So I had to be creative again in figuring out a way in order to fit the engine in,
Yes.
because it was a really difficult situation, because everything was centered around how the shaft went through.
I think we've got a photo of that shaft, right
Right,
there. So
so-
right below that wooden block, that's the shaft we're talking about.
Right, so the shaft starts at the strut,
Yeah.
goes through the log in the hull, and then goes through and through the reverse V-drive transmission.
Right.
So that's the situation that I had to build around, and you can see in those wooden mounts in the mock-up that I made how far away we were from
Right.
the old engine stringers.
So you mocked it up.
I mocked it up. I found some drawings online, in fact, that had a couple of dimensions on them, and I blew them up to scale
Yeah.
to create the mock-up. And it's
Wow.
made a rough foam mock-up.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was pretty darn close.
Now here you're working with your hand tools to
Right.
adjust the engine beds.
I'm trying to utilize the old stringers as much as possible, because it already was glassed into the hull, and they were very strong.
Yeah.
So what I had to do was backfill them with hardwood,
Yep.
and then I cut some chaseways in there so that I can get my fingers in with a nut in the end in order to secure the engine.
Yeah, that makes sense. Here's another shot.
So I also use G10 plates in order to create a ramp.
Yes. Okay.
And then the next shot, I've glassed them in with 4 layers of glass.
All right.
It's very, very important to sand away all the gel coat, or else you're not going to get good adhesion onto the glass.
Right. Right.
So here we are, all painted up and with the mock-up in and through and through onto that shaft.
Yeah. Everything's looking good.
Everything's looking good. It's looking positive.
All
Yeah.
right.
So here we are, the final installation, and it worked out pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I had to create a couple of shim blocks in order to have enough space left over in order to have the final engine alignment. And the engine is just great. And we even put a max prop on there so that we got another knot and a half out of the boat.
Better
out of the
performance
boat
than you
speed.
started with. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to put an engine like that in, you might as well go all the way and put a max prop on. And it was worth it.
So that was a big deal right there, getting
it
that
was.
engine squared away.
Yep.
Yep.
Got it all plumbed up here.
Now this
So-
is really the end of the project, right? You're taking it back out of the storage.
Well, it's towards the end of the project. There was still some stuff to do, but now
Oh.
she's made her debut into the world.
Yeah.
And she's looking real beautiful.
Yeah. Here's another shot.
yeah, we got her to
at
the
marina,
marina.
ready to be put in the water here pretty shortly.
Exactly. We're launching her the next morning.
Let's take a look at that. There it
Here
is in
she
the water.
back in
huh?
her element again.
Beautiful.
And we're going over to the slipway to put her stick in and start to do some test sails.
Yeah. Wow, that's exciting, huh? And here's
Oh,
an
it was
example
great.
of a test sail.
It was such a thrill to know what the boat looked like from before,
right.
and then to see her in her brand new state.
Yes.
You know, because I never got to see that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be a part of the project, and
That's
the
very
owner was
exciting.
just thrilled.
Really?
He's
Yeah.
so happy.
Yeah. And of course you were too.
Oh,
You were
it
able
was
to
a
bring
great
this
project.
back
It's something
to
I've
some
always wanted to do with this boat, is to
Yeah.
make it brand new again.
Yeah.
And finally got the opportunity to do it.
It came
was
out
great.
beautiful. Well, you know, we've covered a lot of ground here today, from picking the project to assessment and dealing with the hardware, the deck, the hull, a lot of stuff. What is it, we've got to wrap up the show. Are there any points that kind of come to your mind in terms of what stood out for you as part of the experience?
Well, one thing that surprised me was the time everything took. If you can calculate, multiply by 3 for everything that you do, you're going to be just fine.
Okay.
Get help if you can.
Okay.
It makes things go a lot faster.
Yes.
When you're working with paint, before you get involved in the big paint project on a hull, I would recommend getting a big 4x8 sheet of masonite and prepping it as if you're going to paint a hull,
Yeah.
and learn how to use the paint.
Right.
It would save you a lot of time and money in the end.
Yeah.
To learn how to use that paint. Get your technique ironed out.
Yeah. Good points. Well, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for watching. If you have comments or questions, please come visit us at the website, www.smartboatingus.com. I hope that you'll come back and join us again soon.